High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on Better Sports Network.
.01 in the PM means it is time for the Better Sports Network's High Stakes Fantasy Football Show exclusively on the Better Sports Network. Thank you so much for tuning in to any of the BSN channels, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Better Sports Network, bettersports.com, betternetwork.com, and of course the FFPC channels. Hi, how you doing? Welcome to week 2. We've made it. It is Eric Balkman here. I am from the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown, the FFPC. You follow me on X at Eric Balkman, and my guest tonight, God, I thought I was busy, and then I looked at this guy. It's the second time he's hosted. Brian Drake at Drake Fantasy on X from Fantasy Points, Fighting Chance Fantasy, and the Fantasy Football Hustle, and a ton of other stuff that he has been nominated for FSWA awards. Welcome back, Brian. So glad to have you.
I was going to say, you've got a really busy schedule too. I've got 500 different things that I try to weave in and out of the day, but man, you're super busy yourself here. That's a kick-ass opening. And I'll also give you credit. You actually say X. I still stick with Twitter. I can't go with X. Elon's a goof. I'm never going to change over. You can't change branding like that. It's like whenever you talk about a stadium and you go, oh, where do the Steelers play? Oh, they play at Heinz Field. No one says Acrisure Stadium or whatever. Right. You've already established the brand. It's dumb. But we had
it, because I'm in Wisconsin, Brian, as you know, and we had for 20 years we had Miller Park, named after the brewery, right? In where the Brewers play. And then last year before the season started, it switched to American Family Field. Literally everybody in Wisconsin still calls it Miller Park. Now, the only reason I do X is because I feel like, and I think I want to say it's TJ from the Rich Eisen show. He said, if you keep calling it Twitter, X will never happen, right? It's like Fetch from Mean Girls. Like, stop trying to make X happen. X isn't going to happen. That's his philosophy on it. I'm trying to be professional. I put a quarter in the jar every time I say Twitter. And my kids are going to go to some really good colleges if this keeps up based on that. But I try to do X. I get it. Like, I am not a Twitter shamer at all. Whatever you want to do. If you go to twitter.com, it still takes you to X. So I don't think
that's the whole point.
Right. My God, we have such a great show tonight. Shout out to Tyler Soto, the man behind the glass tonight, who is running everything. I want to remind everybody before I tell you what's on the show tonight, make sure you're going to myffpc.com, myffpc.com. Get in on the FFPC weekly challenge. There's no draft. There is no salary cap. You just choose 10 players or 12 players. If you want to play with kickers and defenses, if you don't, it's totally up to you. You have both those choices. Just by Sunday's kickoff, get in on it, and then you can watch them ride through the weekend's games. Only one player per NFL team. You can enter at $35. You can enter at $200. You can win up to $2,500. That's at myffpc.com, myffpc.com. Coming up on the show, here's what we got. We're going to help you get set for week 2 with plenty of news and notes that are going around the NFL right now. At the bottom of this hour, we're going to get into the running back report, including stuff for tonight with the Philadelphia Eagles backfield. What's going on with Austin Eckler? We're going to give you the latest on that. And then Aaron Jones, too. Some stuff in him about him in Green Bay here in Wisconsin. We'll get into that Monday night game a little bit because I think there's some interesting backfield talk that we'll get into there. That's all in the first hour. Second hour, we're going to find out where Brian Drake stands on the Bengals offense, the Titans backfield, the Buffalo Bills, teams like that, players, individual players like that. And then before we wrap things up tonight, we will get into some more lineup advice, what to do with Jacoby Myers. Kendrick Bourne, who I did not check the free square of Kendrick Bourne, me being overweight on Kendrick Bourne on my bingo card this season. But my God, after waivers last night, I am way overweight on Kendrick Bourne. We're going to talk about the Vikings wide receivers. Good. That makes me feel better, Brian. Thank you so much. And we're going to talk about Garrett Wilson, what you should be doing with him in both redraft and dynasty now.
Stick around for those takes, folks. Trust me.
And listen, I've seen your X timeline. My God, do you have a lot to say about Garrett Wilson? So we will get into that before we sign off tonight as well. All right, let's get into it here, Brian. First thing up is Brandon Cooks. We know that Clarence Hill, who covers the Cowboys, is saying that he has a sprained MCL. Now, sprained MCL is not necessarily. I mean, from what I've heard over the course of many years, a sprain is still a tear. It's just not a big tear or a full tear. And there's talk about him, potentially even playing this week. I don't think that's likely to happen. I don't believe he practiced today. Mike McCarthy said he'd be working with the rehab group today. McCarthy and Cooks both kind of danced around the topic, not saying no, that he wouldn't suit up against the Jets on Sunday. I think this is compelling for a couple of reasons. Number one, we got to see very little of the real Cowboys offense on Sunday night because the Giants failed to show up for the game. So we don't know exactly how that's going to hash out. Number two, I think this is compelling because if Cooks were to miss, what do we do with Michael Gallup, who we probably drafted as a wide receiver 6, wide receiver 7 in our leagues? Does he all of a sudden become startable, or is this a spot you just want to avoid in general, given the tough matchup? I'm going to let you talk about Cooks, but I would like you to weave in some Gallup discussion here as well.
Thank God for Michael Gallup nearly airballing week 1. In my biggest league that I play in, I was up by, 2 points going into the final game of the weekend, and my opponent had Michael Gallup, and I'm like, well, I'm done. See you later. And I look in the morning, and I won by like 0.6 of a point because I think he caught one pass. So Michael Gallup and Brandon Cooks ran the same percentage of routes, 76% over the weekend. Brandon Cooks, to me, even though I believe he only got 4 targets, he looked like the few times they had to drop back to throw, like Dak was kind of looking for him in some spots. And Brandon Cooks is a good player. He's probably a knucklehead. That's why he's on a new team every year. But if he's not playing, is that going to be an uptick for Michael Gallup or for Jake Ferguson, or God forbid we start to see Jalen Tolbert or Cavante Turpin show up? It's got to be better and more beneficial for Michael Gallup here. They're going to be playing a Jets team that's got a really solid defense, tough to throw. Eric, I'll ask you this. We'll spin it back. We know the Jets defense, they like to just play Sauce Gardner on a side. That's pretty much what they do. Do they just sacrifice Michael Gallup to the left side and say, all right, you go hang out with Sauce all night and run wind sprints? When we'll move, Lamb can play in the slot. He can go in motion. He can line up on the right side, and we'll target him and work other guys in. I kind of feel like that's what's going to happen.
If you want to be successful against the New York Jets, I think you want to be able to move your best pieces away from their best pieces, right? And I think that's what's going to happen with CeeDee Lamb. I would have no qualm starting him, obviously. But the other thing, too, is Kellen Moore is not on this team anymore, or not the OC on this team, and you have Brian Schottenheimer in there. And immediately when I saw that, for drafting season, I was moving down players like not CeeDee Lamb, but I was moving players like Jake Ferguson, Michael Gallup, and Brandon Cooks slightly down on my boards. And as a result, I don't have to count on these guys for anything from week to week. I think there are better fantasy pockets of goodness out there this week that I can avoid the Cowboys and sleep comfortably at night about it. So I'm not sweating it. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah, you could rather play Nico Collins or somebody or Allen Robinson if you're that deep where you need to play Michael Gallup. That's a deep league.
And it's very deep. And think about it too. Like, Brian, we're not into bye weeks yet. We don't have unless you have Cooper Kupp or something or Deontay Johnson, who we'll get into in a little bit. Like, you shouldn't have significant wide receiver injuries. So, like, if you're worried about starting Michael Gallup or Brandon Cooks, this is just look the other way. Just find somebody else. Like, don't
find somebody else. That is the right answer, Rick.
Right.
Find somebody else. Don't worry about start Jordan Addison tonight instead.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Let's do this. Normally I'd say this for the running back report, but if you're going to show up right when the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show starts, you better damn well understand you're going to get your question answered. We'll go to Matthew Bingham, who's watching us on the Better Sports Network YouTube channel right now. He wants to know, how do we see Philly's backfield shaking out tonight with Kenneth Gainwell inactive and Rashad Penny, who was a healthy scratch last week, dressed? He says, if there are 30 running back opportunities, including carries and targets, how is that pie split up between DeAndre Swift, Rashad Penny, and Boston Scott tonight? So as I look at this, and I don't know how you feel about the Vikings defense. I think they're a fraud, even with Flores. You know, you had Baker Mayfield last week talking about how he figured out their signals before halftime or at halftime, and he knew what was going on. So to me, it's just like, listen, Brian Flores can be the best chef in the world, but if you give him, you know, mustard and, you know, dry bread, he's not going to be able to make a good meal for you.
They don't have any talent on that defense,
Exactly.
especially in that secondary.
Right. And so I think this is a time when the Eagles, you know, running backs definitely could feast tonight. Now, I have Swift going in a few leagues as a flex, and I'm comfortable with that. Rashad Penny, the healthy scratch last week has me freaked out about him in general. Like, should I even be rostering this guy, right? Because they had Boston Scott active ahead of him. And this is Scott's another guy. If he's not playing the Giants, quite frankly, I'm not interested in starting Boston Scott. You are the Eagles expert here. I will turn this over to you. What do you do with the Eagles running backs tonight against the Minnesota Vikings?
I'm telling you, don't be surprised if Boston Scott leads this team in carries tonight. It wouldn't shock me at all, because partly why is he active? Well, they also need a backup kick returner. So if something were to happen to Britton Covey returning punts, or nobody returns a kickoff anymore. It doesn't matter. But that's kind of what Boston Scott could do. I'm telling you, it would not shock me at all if he was the lead guy tonight. Penny, I mean, how can you ever start him with confidence right now? He's a healthy scratch. He wasn't looking great in camp. You know, everyone talks about all the agility he had and breaking tackles and all that. A lot of that's a few years ago, really. Swift needs to get schemed up, and they did that for Gainwell a little bit at the beginning of last week. I was shocked because the Eagles and Jalen Hurts just simply don't throw the ball to the running backs. No Eagles running back last year, Eric, had a receiving touchdown. So it's not in their game. You've got Dallas Goedert, you got A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith. That's who you throw to. And really, my thought all offseason was we were coming up the drafts. If you want the best Eagles running back, just draft Jalen Hurts. So I get it. People are going to want to play some of these guys. Maybe you're playing DraftKings, maybe whatever you're doing tonight. I guess you'd say Swift, but you know what? I would probably, if there's 30 carries, I'm going to say 12 of them go to Boston Scott. 12 go to him. I don't know, give Penny like 5, and then the rest go to Swift, I guess. But they don't trust Swift between the tackles. No coaching staff does.
Okay, let's delve into this a little bit further. Let's say you're in a 12-team, 20-round draft league, like the FFPC main event or the Fantasy Pros Championship. Is Rashad Penny cuttable at this point?
I think you got to see what happens tonight.
Okay.
This is a really good litmus test because he's active. So let's see if they've got him in the game plan. And remember, Philadelphia, even though they were winning that game early last week, it was bad weather. It was a game you could have used a grinder to really kind of put that game away in the second half when they let the Patriots back in. But let's say tonight, let's say they jump out to a lead, and in the second half, they got to put them away. And that's what the Eagles did all last year. They jumped on people. They scored more points in the second quarter than anybody. Second half, they just put it on cruise control. That would be Rashad Penny time. See what happens tonight. I wouldn't go cutting him yet because the offense is too good. And then what happens if one of these other guys gets hurt, which we've just seen with Gainwell? And we know Swift is Mr. Glass. He'll get hurt walking to the stadium tonight. So don't cut him yet.
Don't cut Penny yet. I'm glad I didn't in the majority of my leagues. So interesting stuff there from you. We'll have more to say about that Philly running back situation coming up in the next segment as well. So interesting stuff here from Deontay Johnson personally. And I don't know how you feel about this, Brian, but when I get news directly about an injury directly from the player himself, I always get very nervous about that. And I don't necessarily trust it because I think that players overvalue how healthy they are and undervalue how serious their injury is and undervalue how serious the team is going to be treating their injury. So Brooke Pryor, who covers the Steelers, reported this afternoon, that Deontay Johnson actually says he's day-to-day. Now, this is coming off a report that Johnson, according to the team, was going to miss about a month due to this hamstring injury.
That's a big change, a month to day-to-day.
Right, but now here's what we have to decipher is, did Deontay Johnson always believe that this was a day-to-day injury, and did the Steelers always believe that this was more week-to-week? Is it somewhere in the middle, or is it seriously on one end of the polar end of the opposites here? Because the Steelers definitely are not of one mind with Johnson when it comes to this. And this is significant because I think a lot of people undervalued Deontay Johnson during draft season. And I like Kenny Pickett this year to take a big step forward. So I was in on Deontay Johnson. And now I'm not only am I not so sure about Deontay Johnson's status, which I guess doesn't really matter for week 2. What does matter for week 2 is the fantasy value of Calvin Austin and Allen Robinson. Is there any? Obviously, Pickens is almost a must start at this point because he's got the number 1 status. You're firing up Pat Freiermuth more leagues than you're not. But what about Calvin Austin? What about Allen Robinson in week 2? Is there anything there, Brian?
Absolutely, there's something there. When you take Deontay Johnson and his 6 targets from a week ago. Now, again, this is a very low octane offense at this point. It's kind of the old like horizontal raid that they've been throwing in Arizona and what the Chargers were running last year. It's off. Matt Canada shouldn't have that job, but that's neither here nor there. But Allen Robinson,
by the way, that is not an unpopular opinion.
Yeah, I mean, he's a goof. So isn't he like, I don't know, this is way off topic, but like, isn't he like buddies with the coach's like son or something? I heard some story that like they're good pals or either way, who cares? So either Allen Robinson had a really good training camp, had 8 targets in week 1. You can't scoff at that. Even though if we laugh, hey, Allen Robinson hasn't been good in a few years. Dude got 8 targets, still went 5 for 64. I love Calvin Austin. I think both of those guys, when you look at how much they're throwing the football, when Robinson got 8 targets, Deontay got 6, Calvin Austin got 6, Pickens got 7. Even some of the running backs were getting 6 targets. Warren got 6. Some guy named Hayward I've never even heard of got 4. So, there's opportunity here in Pittsburgh. And Allen Robinson ran a route 88% of the Steelers dropbacks. He ran a route 16% of the targets. I mean, yeah, I picked Allen Robinson up in some leagues. Do I feel great about it? No, but if he's going to get 8 targets a week, I mean, there's damn near there's gold in them there hills, I guess you could say. What if Allen Robinson turns into very much like what we're seeing in Houston, where there's Nico Collins, there's Robert Woods. Nobody wanted to draft Robert Woods, right? He's old, he's slow. Well, guess what? He's a professional receiver. Allen Robinson is just 2 years ago, the Eagles desperately wanted to sign Allen Robinson, right? And they were going to give him big money. He decided not to go there. And, the deal never got done. And that's how they went after that and got A.J. Brown. Thank God. Allen Robinson's not that far from being a legitimate player. If he's healthy and he's in this offense and it's just all short stuff over the middle, because that seems to be what Pickett wants to throw, I think Allen Robinson's got a shot here. What do you think of Calvin Austin? Real speedy dude. I think he's better than Robinson, but Canada is such a dope that he's going to force targets to Allen Robinson.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think Austin at this point of his career is better than Robinson, and I think he probably deserved a little bit more playing time than what he got last year. The fact that they have Robinson in there now, and now this is a golden opportunity for him to shine. I could totally envision a scenario where Robinson gets all the targets. He's not necessarily that efficient with them. And then Austin in the 4 or 5 targets he gets, he catches like 3 for 60 and maybe a touchdown, right? It's just the way it seems. But I bring this up all the time, and you know this, Brian. Like, it doesn't matter what you and I think. It doesn't matter what Fantasy X thinks. It doesn't matter what high stakes fantasy football players think. All that matters is what the coaching staff thinks, because they're the ones that are in charge, and Kenny Pickett to a degree too, because they're the ones in charge of getting him on the field, and they're the ones in charge of getting the ball. So I think that's the issue that we have to wrestle with. And I will say this in regards to Matt Canada. So he actually was an interim coach of the University of Maryland about 6 years ago, and apparently Matt Canada had his first recruit was a 3-star wide receiver named Dino Tomlin out of Shady Side Academy, which just happens to be Mike Tomlin's son. When this guy was not being recruited at all. So that is the connection with Canada and Tomlin.
I knew that he knew him. I heard that somewhere, and it stuck with me. That's why he's hanging around. I mean, come on.
At Canada, so this is weird. So not weird, maybe totally normal. Remember when Todd Haley was the OC in Pittsburgh, obviously. He gets fired. Randy Fichtner takes over, who is all buddy with Ben Roethlisberger. Ben Roethlisberger retires. Matt Canada gets promoted from quarterbacks coach to OC, and now here we're at complaining about the Steelers offense on Twitter.
Can we bring Bruce Arians back? What's he doing?
Oh yeah, that'd be great. I didn't even think about that. Yeah, I'm totally in for Bruce Arians. Like, even if he's got to like do it remotely, well,
Yeah.
like you can't,
Just over Zoom.
Oh yeah, over Zoom. Be the ZOC, the Zoom offensive coordinator. Brian Drake and I are starting the petition tonight here on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show. It's going to happen.
How funny would that be? Just I work from home. I work remote. Everybody does it these days.
Yeah, exactly. And why can't he? Why can't he? He totally could. New England Patriots. What a game they had against your Eagles last week. How much were you sweating that game? So yeah,
they should have won.
So if Bourne gets that 1 foot down at the 10-yard line, they probably do win, right?
And they had a lot of penalties. Here's what I'll say about the Patriots. If you watch the game, you'll say a number of things. Number one, that is a legit defense. They're really well coached. They play hard. It's a ton of guys you've never heard of, but they're good. And they're going to be a good fantasy defense, I think. Once they kind of weave through the season, they got a tough schedule. But man, they have a legit offense now. Wow, who knew? You get an offensive coordinator in there, and like we're talking about with Pittsburgh, and things happen. Really good quick game. Mac Jones excels in that. They don't have any speed at all. They can't beat you down the field. Their number one receiver is Kendrick Bourne. He's kind of he'd be like a third receiver maybe on most other teams. But on this team where Juju can't run, you got Devontae Parker. He should have retired 3 years ago. Like, it's him and Hunter Henry. So if you have either of those guys, and I picked up both in several leagues this week, they're going to get the targets because they don't have anybody else. It's just that simple. We can poo-poo them as, they're not good, they're not talented. There's nobody else. They're not, Randy Moss ain't walking through that door.
Irving Fryer not walking through that door. Wes Welker not walking through that door. So let's talk about this, which I think this goes to the roster churn aspect of the Patriots wide receivers. Andrew Callahan, who covers the New England Patriots, says that, quote, multiple team sources believe Smith-Schuster is not presently among the team's 5 most effective pass catchers. And we actually saw this at the end of that Patriots-Eagles game on Sunday, where he wasn't even on the field.
Yeah.
And it was Kendrick Bourne who, and we'll wrap. I mean, I want you to talk about Smith-Schuster and Bourne here, but the thing is with Bourne, I have seen receivers come and go who have big week ones, right? And then they fade out of existence. I think about the Thursday night game between the Cowboys and Buccaneers, probably 6-7 years ago or so.
I know. I remember.
I can't remember the guy's name. Who was the guy who caught the 2 or 3 touchdowns that night?
Was it not Kevin Ogletree? Was it him? No.
It might have been Ogletree. And Ogletree ends up, he has like a stat line of like 6 for 110 and 2 touchdowns. Everybody goes gaga over him. And what happens? That was his best game of the season, and it wasn't close. So obviously, when I'm placing my waiver bids and trying to pick up, playmakers here after week 1, I have that in the back of my mind, right? Like, I understand that whoever I am bidding heavy on may have already had their best game of the season. But if you look closer at Kendrick Bourne, dude had 11 targets, I want to say. I mean, that's not an insignificant amount. Throw out the touchdowns because they're not sticky. They can be fluky. But the fact that the Patriots treated him as a number 1 wide receiver, not only on passing downs, but the fact of how many times he was out there, even on running plays. And this guy was like, he made some moves on James Bradbury that game too. And obviously the Patriots thought enough of Bourne to put Bradbury on him. To me, these are all things like, you have to understand, like, this might not be fool's gold. Maybe it still is. You never know. But to me, he looked like a number 1 wide receiver, and both teams were treating him as a number 1 wide receiver. I went heavy on him. I got him in way too many leagues. I probably got him in more than a dozen leagues. And anytime, you have something like that, Brian, I always feel nervous about it. But with Kendrick Bourne, I mean, like, if he goes off again against the Dolphins this week, he's looking like a top 25 receiver going forward here.
He finishes PPR wide receiver 5 on the week. And here's some great nuggets here for you. He was by far the most involved Patriots receiver. He was out there for 93% of the Patriots routes. The next closest was Kayshon Boutte, who stinks. He's a rookie. He's not ready for prime time yet at 74%. Juju was under 50. DeMario Douglas, who I believe is a rookie, was under 50%. The targets per route run is huge, over 20% target share. I mean, just look at that, 20% target share. They're either going to throw to Bourne, they're going to throw to Ramondre, or they're throwing to Hunter Henry. That's it. Yep. So
I think the other thing too. So obviously, Bourne represents a great ad in fantasy football right now. What about Juju Smith-Schuster? If this guy is not among the top 5 receivers in New England, and he's behind, again, according to Andrew Callahan's sources, he's behind Kayshon Boutte, he's behind Demario Douglas. Is this a guy that we can go ahead and cut again in deep, leagues where 240 players are rostered?
Yeah,
is Juju Smith-Schuster cuttable right now, Brian?
I think he is, especially if you want to make room for, I mean, obviously, the Puka Nakuas of the world, but, maybe Kendrick Bourne wasn't drafted in your league. Who would you rather have, Kendrick Bourne or Schuster, a guy that plays nearly 100% of their routes, or a guy who runs less than half? So if you got to make that flip-flop, I'm all for it. My son is getting into fantasy football. He's doing his first ever league, and he drafted a team, and I just totally let him, Derek, go take the team you want. He took Jalen Hurts in the first round, but he drafted Juju on the team. And even tonight, I just kind of nudged him a little bit. I'm like, hey, when you're sitting in a lineup there, you don't have to start Juju. Maybe we can move on from him. And, it's on ESPN. So I just go, literally, I have like waiver columns for sites I work for. He swears by Mike Clay now. And I go, I know Mike. I can message him. Like, I'll call him and he'll tell you not to play Juju. But he's like, if it's not in that article on the ESPN app, like he doesn't listen to Dad in any of his shows.
I think that's hilarious. Number one, that your son holds you in high regard because you can rub shoulders with other fantasy celebrities, but not necessarily your own fantasy celebrity status doesn't carry any weight with him. That is hilarious.
I'd listen to Mike Clay too over.
We should. We all should for sure. Okay, let's move on and talk about Jerry Jeudy here. Limited practice yesterday, full practice today, which is great. This is what we want. And we found out from Sean Payton that he was actually pretty close to being playing on Sunday. James Palmer from NFL.com had that report. He's at home this week against the Washington Commanders. I don't know. What do you do with him? Like, again, we're talking about a situation where no bye weeks, not a lot of injuries. Obviously, if you're hit hard by injuries, you may not have a choice. How do you feel about Jerry Jeudy in his first week of 2023, Brian?
If Jerry Judy's playing and my team isn't, it's not a bomb squad where, do I play more Calvin Ridley or somebody? I'm starting him. I mean, look at the guys on this team. So Cortland Sutton's running around. If you got a chance to get little Jordan Humphrey on the field, by God, you do it. And they did it a ton. One of Sean Payton's boys. I think I got Brandon Johnson. We didn't see Marvin Mims hardly at all. What a disappointment that was.
Yeah.
Now, and also Dulcich is hurt, so we're not going to have Dulcich this week. The door's wide open for Jeudy to just come in and command a big target share and do really well. And I think that's exactly what's going to happen. If I own Jeudy, I'm starting him.
I think, you're probably right. Okay, let me throw this at you. Let's talk about a team where, this is kind of individualized, but I'm going to just paint this picture for you. Let's say you have a team with like Chris Olave, you have Amari Cooper on your squad, you have George Pickens, and you have Jerry Jeudy as your number 4. Would you play Jeudy over a guy like Pickens? Because I mean, this is where it comes in. Like, let's say you're in a league where you have to start 3 receivers. Maybe you don't have a flex, or maybe you have to start 2 receivers and you don't have a flex. Because I think like Jerry Jeudy is interesting as like a top 40 or 45 guy. But when you get into like a top 30 or 35, then I think it becomes a little bit more compelling.
And we'll see as the season plays out if he.
For right now, you're right. You're totally right. But for right now, I think if Jerry Jeudy comes out, catches 5 for 60 or whatever this week, and he no setbacks, we're firing that dude up as a top 30 receiver, every week going forward after that. The interesting thing is this week, and we'll throw in the, obviously the Puka Nacua aspect, obviously it has a bearing on this. Maybe you picked him up. Zay Flowers was really good this past week as well. So I guess like the question really here for you, Brian, is like, where does Jeudy fall in as far as your rankings go? Is he a top 40 guy? Is he a top 35 guy? Where's the cutoff for Jeudy this week?
I think Jeudy, if he's healthy and they play him, and they said he was close to playing last week, if he's healthy enough to play, Sean Payton is going to have a plan for him. And I think he's going to be that main slot receiver that has been uber productive in Sean Payton offenses. And I'm still good with playing him. If George Pickens didn't have the opportunity with Deontay gone this week, that might be an even easier call. You might just go like, Pickens, if he doesn't catch a bomb or something. I mean, they went back to his garbage route tree of just running go routes the whole game. So maybe that's kind of just what Pickens is. He's just a big play deep threat guy right now until we see more.
I think you could be right on that too. And we'll again, we're trying to help you out the best we can. We're like you. We got 1 week's worth of information on this. Matthew Bingham is blowing up our YouTube chat right now with some running back conversation. Matthew, I promise we'll get to that shortly with the Chargers running backs because everybody wants to talk about it. The last thing I want to bring up here before we go to our first break, DeAndre Hopkins did not practice yesterday. He did not practice today. How bullish are you on Hopkins playing? And I guess, Brian, it kind of depends what he does in practice tomorrow. Let's say he doesn't practice tomorrow. Is Burks a guy you got to find a way to get in your lineup? Not to mention Chigoziem Okonkwo as well.
Hey, I put out a tweet today, or whatever they call it. I put out a post on the app formerly known as Twitter.
Right.
And Treylon Burks is only owned in like 60% of Yahoo leagues right now. He was dropped by a ton of leagues. So let's say DeAndre Hopkins doesn't play. You got to get a hold of Treylon Burks. I don't know why Burks would be dropped in the first place. I know he had kind of a down week, but great report through camp. He's coming back, getting healthy again. He's an upside guy that's going to help you win a championship if he can hit. That's a friend of mine, Scott Barrett, who works at Fantasy Points with me. That's his whole spiel. Upside wins championships. A guy like Treylon Burks has major upside. And DeAndre Hopkins is no spring chicken. What if he goes down for the year? That's totally in the realm of possibilities because he's getting up there in age. Now Treylon Burks is the number one on a team with a pretty bad offensive line. I don't trust Derrick Henry this year at all, just because they're never going to have a lead. They've shown already they want to have their passing down back, Tajay Spears, in there much more. So, yeah, well, why not take a shot on Treylon Burks? So monitor that situation. He didn't do anything with he ran the highest percentage of routes on the whole team. So he's out there. He's running wind sprints. We just got to give him the ball, and maybe Tannehill will get it to him before the Jets trade for him.
Certainly going to be very much easier to do that if Hopkins is not on the field. So make sure you're monitoring those practice reports tomorrow. We are off and running, and we've just gotten started here on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show. Brian Drake joining me tonight at Drake Fantasy on the X, Fantasy Points, Fighting Chance Fantasy, and the Fantasy Football Hustle with Dwayne McFarland as well. We're going to get into the running back report. Matthew Bingham, your question about the Chargers running backs with Joshua Kelly and Austin Eckler, who was MIA again today. That is coming up. We're going to tackle that as well as the Colts, the Packers, the Bills, the Jets, and the Ravens running back situation, minus J.K. Dobbins as well. I'm Eric Balkman. He's Brian Drake. This is the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show only on the Better Sports Network.
Like Devon Levi started off in the friend zone and now like he could possibly be wife material. So it is exceptionally hard to trust a rookie goalie in the NHL. The kid is what? He's 21. Like, okay. And he is going to the Buffalo Sabres. But we've all agreed that the Buffalo Sabres are at least a somewhat better hockey team on paper. Again, it's hard to trust a rookie goalie. We've seen future Hall of Fame goalies like, Fleury in his first year struggle, right? Carey Price in his first year struggle. It is tough for goalies to come in and have success. That being said, nobody outside of maybe a Buffalo sports fan can tell me who these two goalies on their roster are, because I didn't know until this morning, until I was reminded that it was Eric Comrie and Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. And I was like, okay, well, he has the crease to himself. So all he can do is lose it. That's all he can do. Buffalo is going to be a fun team to watch, which means maybe Devon Levi ends up in what I call the Martin Jones syndrome, which is a goals against average is pretty up there. Save percentage is not very good, but he's going to finish with 35 wins because he's just going to play a lot. And it's going to be that back and forth hockey. The Atlantic Division is not very good, right? There are some teams that are going to regress. So there's opportunities here for Buffalo to do well. And I think his over-under on wins is set at 24.5. So again, there's a lot of things that I may not trust about him, but as a 13th goalie off the board, and I think that is a reach at 13. I think a lot of people have him farther back than that. So he may be 13 on NHL.com's list, but you may end up and show up in your Yahoo or your ESPN draft, and they haven't ranked probably outside of the top 20. So I would have no issue as a second goalie going with Levi, because like, who's taking his spot? Nobody. And volume at one point, if you're in a league that doesn't penalize you for losses, if you're in a league that rewards saves and save bonuses like, for daily, DraftKings does, he has all that working for him. So if it doesn't work out, all right, fine. Then you can go and pick up whoever is there. But it is his net to lose. I understand the risk. I will definitely take, because that's how you win championships, right? You got to take risks to win them. If you're safe, you're going to finish, eliminated in the first round and you had a good time. Or you can try to win the championship on draft day.
The Fantasy Alarm All-Pro subscription plus the Fantasy Football Draft Guide and Cheat Sheet is available right now. Just start a free 7-day trial. Fantasy Alarm's All-Pro subscription. Week 2 content and picks are free. Just go to fantasyalarm.com/NFL. Fantasyalarm.com/NFL. Welcome back to the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show here on the Better Sports Network. Eric Balkman and Brian Drake coming at you. Brian Drake, of course, at Drake Fantasy on the X Machine, Fantasy Points, Fighting Chance Fantasy, and the Fantasy Football Hustle as well. Joining me tonight until 9 o'clock, we got the Eagles and the Vikings coming up in roughly an hour or so. It is Fantasy Football Night in America here on the Better Sports Network, and who better to lead us into the running back report than what's going on in Los Angeles right now with the Chargers. So right now, what we're looking at here is an injury situation with Austin Eckler. He did not practice yesterday. He did not practice today with an ankle injury. Now, Matthew Bingham is pointing out in our YouTube chat right now, if Joshua Kelly does get the start for the Chargers this week, is he a trap fantasy start, since the Titans do have a pretty good rush defense? Jamal Williams, 18 carries, 45 yards. That was less than 3 yards per carry last week. Chargers can move the ball through the air too. It's not like they have to go on the ground. They have Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, Gerald Everett, Quentin Johnston, Joshua Palmer, and a really talented quarterback in Justin Herbert. For me personally, Brian, I look at Joshua Kelly as a guy that plays on an elite offense, and if Eckler's out, he's going to get a ton of opportunity. Regardless of the Titans' defense, he should be a volume guy. So it's going to be difficult for me to say, yeah, you got to sit him. I think he can work out as a flex. I think he can work out as a running back too. That said, I'm not expecting a 30-point week here, but I do think that you got to start him.
Yeah, Josh Kelly is a guy who I drafted in the Kings Classic draft. We do it out of Canton, Ohio, and I took him in a league. I'm playing against, Jeff Manns, Bob Harris, all these big-time guys. I took him with literally the last pick in the draft for myself in the 16th round. Curtis Patrick of RotoViz comes up to me afterwards. He goes, "You son of a bitch." He goes, I was going to take Josh Kelly. And he went on to explain that I just took Josh Kelly because I go, wow, if Austin Eckler gets hurt, this is the guy I want. He had a very in-depth, thought-out answer. And he goes, if you look at the offensive coordinator, he has always used 2 running backs, and he's used them effectively. And he goes, that he did it in Dallas. And now Moore is going to do it out in Los Angeles. And lo and behold, he was right. I mean, who knows? That Curtis is a smart guy. That's why he works at RotoViz. Josh Kelly is a guy, though, who's going to get work regardless of if Austin Eckler's there or not. Yes, did he get more work once Eckler got banged up? Of course he did. But who are they going to put in behind him? I mean, this could be a situation where he just gets the lion's share of the work this week. Maybe it's a 3-week run. Who knows? A buddy of mine just texted me. He's got Josh Kelly. He goes, what would you trade Josh Kelly for? And I was like, well, why are you trying to trade Josh Kelly? Like, this is why you have guys like Josh Kelly on your roster. So the month you can start him, you start him because he's on a great offense. He's going to get all the goal line work, we assume, and he's going to catch a couple passes. If you got Josh Kelly, don't overthink it. Put his ass in your lineup.
And obviously, if Eckler misses, right?
Like yes. Eckler's not going to play.
That's the caveat. So that you're that sure of it right now, because I think that's compelling. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of people, maybe myself included, that have to make a decision on DeAndre Swift tonight. And the question is, like, do you roll out Swift, or do you wait and hope that Eckler misses so you could play Joshua Kelly? Because I think that's compelling as well. But if you are convinced, Ryan, that Eckler is going to miss, then it's an easy thing for you where you just sit Swift tonight and you play Kelly.
If it was me and it's my team, I'm playing. I know Josh Kelly's going to play, and I know he's going to have a big role. I don't know what kind of role DeAndre Swift is going to have. And there's multiple other guys, and his quarterback could steal rushing touchdowns. Again, of course, I say that, and Justin Herbert had one last week. But, Josh Kelly versus Swift, I'm taking Josh Kelly, every single day and twice on Sunday. And hopefully he gets in the end zone twice this Sunday because I'm playing in a lot of spots.
Exactly. Twice on Sunday and once every other day of the week. I wasn't going to bring this up, but I'll bring it up right now. So I get a text from one of my buddies who I do some radio work with, and he actually has a situation, and we kind of touched on this in the first segment. He wants to know, is he crazy to start Tyler Algier at home against the Packers over Terry McLaurin? Couple of things to keep in mind. Algier actually had more touches than Bijan Robinson last week, and there's talk coming out of Denver that Patrick Surtain is actually going to be shadowing Terry McLaurin in the matchup against the Commanders this week. I told him he wasn't crazy to think about Algier over McLaurin, but I did say I'd have to think about it in regards to starting Algier over McLaurin. Basically, I said full PPR, I think you could make the case for McLaurin. Half PPR or standard, I think Algier's the choice there.
I own Algier in a spot too with Bijan, and I joked around. I said, I'm going to start both of them. Why not? Just get them both in the lineup. They don't want to throw the football in Atlanta. They don't. They have great weapons. They refuse to use them. That just isn't who they are. And we in the fantasy community make this mistake all the time, Eric. We see something and we wish cast it into existence.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, this year they're going to throw the ball to Pitts and London more. Why? What changed? It's the same offensive coordinator. It's another crappy quarterback. They didn't sign Aaron Rodgers. They don't have somebody who they can drop back and let him sit in the pocket all day long. Their quarterback's terrible. Terry McLaurin has turf toe. Okay. Terry McLaurin's quarterback, we have a very small sample size on, and Sam Howell. I mean, is his upside greater than Algier's? Sure, probably, because he's a wide receiver. He can catch a 60-yard touchdown pass. Boom, there's a bazillion points. Your day is made. But I don't trust that Commanders offense. I don't trust Sam Howell. I trust that Arthur Smith is a total boomer, and he's going to run the ball 50 times this week, and 25 of those are going to go to Tyler Algier. So it's not crazy at all. If he did that and he asked me my opinion, I'd say, all right, I see it. I'm with it. Go for it.
Yeah. And that's the thing. We always, and you know this too, like, we give our advice, but it's not our team. Ultimately, it comes down to you. Go with your brain, go with your gut. Take us as a data point, but don't take us as gospel, right?
I love that. I always tell people when they slide in my DMs and ask me questions, I go, just go with your gut.
Yeah.
Because if I get it wrong, then you're going to hate me and you're going to unfollow me, and I need all the followers I can get. So
speaking of followers, all the followers you can get, man, the Colts running backs, they need some fans right now because it's tough. Zach Moss, full participant in practice yesterday. I assume full participant today. Now, he was pretty good at the end of last season when Jonathan Taylor was out, and Shane Steichen was talking about using him on early downs during the preseason this year. Deion Jackson coughed up the ball like it was a bodily function on Sunday. I don't know how much action he's going to get. Evan Hull just got placed on injured reserve. There's not a lot to like there. I don't know, man. Like, I think you still got to be desperate, even though the situation is developing for Moss and Jackson in Indianapolis. They go to Houston this week, which on the surface you'd think, oh my goodness, give me all I can, give those guys all they can eat, right? But I don't know, like Moss and Jackson to me are guys that unless I was super desperate at flex, I still think I'm staying away from this week.
I added Zach Moss in a number of leagues. Several I got him for free. People just didn't want him. I mean, you're going to start Jake Uptown Funk. I mean, come on. What are we doing here? And then the leading rusher here is going to be Anthony Richardson. This team ran for 65 yards last week. 40 of them were the quarterback. Yeah. All right. So they need a little help. They obviously don't want Richardson running it all the time, even though he's going to run it, probably 10 plus times a week. You're 100% right there with Moss. Get him on the bench, see what happens. Who knows if Jonathan Taylor ever plays for this team again? He may not. He may get traded. Baltimore needs a running back. I mean, please, for my shares of Jonathan Taylor on injured reserve, I'd love that. But I think you got to wait until you're really desperate or some bye week, something to put Moss in your lineup. If you're starting Zach Moss right now, you drafted poorly. Or you just have the worst luck in the world.
Or like Dobbins and Eckler or something like that. Like, that's the way it works out. What about this question we have from Matthew Bingham, and we'll put this on the running back report here.
We should just have Matthew join the show.
I know, yeah, no kidding. He's giving us a lot of free content here. At the very least, he should be getting a producer credit on the show. He wants to know the backup running back to own for the Bengals right now. Chris Evans got hurt. It's down to Travion Williams and Chase Brown. If Joe Mixon were to get hurt, and let's say Evans is not ready for week 3, do the Bengals promote one of those guys, or maybe they just go to a committee with like Chase Brown and Travion Williams, or do they go out and sign a guy like Kareem Hunt, Leonard Fournette? I know we're kind of living in the matrix a little bit on this question, but it's a good one because, I mean, I have a couple of teams where I have Travion Williams. I have a ton of dynasty teams where I have Chase Brown. What are your thoughts on the running back situation in Cincinnati now that we know Captain America has gone down?
Oh, yeah, it's Travion Williams, I believe. I mean, you just look at the snap share and the way they used him. I do agree with you. If something were to happen, maybe they sign the, artist formerly known as Kareem Hunt. Maybe, Lenny gets signed. That'd be a good spot for Fournette, actually. They should just sign Fournette anyways. Why wouldn't he want to go there? Like, maybe you might get a Super Bowl ring to go hang out. But, yeah, it's Travion Williams for me. And I hope I never have to play him.
Aaron Jones did not practice, and Matthew, hopefully that helps. Aaron Jones did not practice yesterday or today, hamstring issue. And the Packers, we know, are notoriously cautious on soft tissue injuries and just injuries in general. I don't believe he plays this week. I think it's going to be A.J. Dillon and then either Patrick Taylor or Emmanuel Wilson. But I think that A.J. Dillon is going to get all he can eat. I am not, and quite frankly have never been, a big A.J. Dillon fan for fantasy. I think he's a tremendous human being. I see what he does for the people in Northeast Wisconsin, all the charity work. I think he's a fantastic person. But for fantasy, I'm not so sure. And I think that's the question here. Like, what do you think about the Falcons defense after what you saw, what they did to Carolina last week? Shutting down Bryce Young, but not exactly being very stingy on the ground. I think Carolina got the better part of 150 yards against the Atlanta Falcons. If Jones does miss, is Dillon a guy that you got to find a way to get in as a potential top 20 running back this week?
Well, yeah, you're exactly right. Is they just gave up 154 yards to the Panthers. So I do an article every week for a site called Sports Kita. If you're big into wrestling or cricket, you might know them, but we're getting into the fantasy. Hop on board. We're starting that train. But I put in my starts for the week at running back, A.J. Dillon, only if Aaron Jones doesn't play this week, because he's going to get a boatload of work. And, maybe he falls in the end zone. God bless America. That'd be fantastic. But he didn't look good last week. He really didn't. 1.5 yards a carry. I mean, really? That you're an NFL running back? 13 carries for 19 yards? That's pretty bad. But
and a second-round pick to boot. I mean, he's got draft capital behind him, and he hasn't developed.
No, it's weird. And I remember when he came out too, everyone goes, this might be the end for Aaron Jones. And Aaron Jones is old. They gave him that money, and I know they took a little bit back, but that was a dumb contract to give Aaron Jones all that loot in my eyes. But We'll see if he can turn it around, stay healthy all season. If he's gone, if there's no Aaron Jones, all right, I sign off on playing A.J. Dillon. Any other week Aaron Jones is healthy, no. I don't even know if I'd want A.J. Dillon on my team because there's no upside.
Right. Yeah, I didn't draft him anywhere because, I mean, like, the thing is he is not being drafted as an injury away type guy. You know, you think about the injury away type guys like Kyron Williams is a good example, or
Sean Tucker.
Sean Tucker, another perfect example.
Yeah.
Dillon is going like 3 or 4 rounds ahead of those guys, and at that point, it kind of destroys your profit margin, so to speak, to draft a guy like that because you're not really cashing in on the best possible way to spend your draft picks. The best possible way to spend your draft picks, so those backup running backs, are getting those explosive guys that need the opportunity. You know, Dillon's going to mix in, and he's going to be, you know, worked in on every single Packers game plan every week. You're not really interested in every week. You're interested in on the games that Jones misses. And even then it's like, I don't know how big his upside is, which is why I stayed away from him. So I think that's the way we're handling the Packers this week. If Jones doesn't play, which I don't think he will, you can start Dillon, but you really got to limit your expectations because he ain't Aaron Jones. That is a fact. Monday night, fun game. Except for Aaron Rodgers and Aaron Rodgers fans and Jets fans. James Cook. Let's talk about the Bills first. 12 carries, 46 yards in the loss to the Jets. He also had 4 catches for 17 yards. The stuff that was pumped down our throat and into our brains in the preseason was that James Cook was going to be a 3-down back for Buffalo. I always said I'll believe it when I see it because I know Buffalo has struggled over the past several years trying to find a bell cow running back, trying to find a guy who can play on all 3 downs. Maybe Cook was going to be the guy. Maybe he wasn't. I took a shot on him early in drafting season, and then when his price went up, I kind of stayed away. But it certainly looks like he's the guy right now. Is that the way you're treating James Cook, Brian? And then also, as an addendum to that, what about the backup running back? Are you keeping Damian Harris around to be that injury away type guy and then just letting loose on Latavius Murray like he's dead to you? I feel like I ask this on one of my shows every single week, but your take on the Buffalo backfield as it stands right now.
Yeah, I wasn't a guy that was like pounding the table. I know there was a lot of folks out there and some of my best friends in the industry were like, you got to get James Cook. And they could be totally right. We've seen one game. 12 for 46. I mean, that's kind of what I think you're going to get from James Cook most weeks. The running game is not what the Buffalo Bills do. Their offensive line stinks. They want to drop back and let Josh Allen play superhero. He's not someone who's going to look to throw the ball all that much to the running backs. I mean, look at Cook got 4 for 16. He got 6 targets, which is amazing. Like if I signed up for that every week and said, hey, James Cook's going to get 6 targets, you'd be all for it. But nothing is designed. It's all just kind of like last second dump off stuff. They don't scheme anything up for him in the pass game. So, you know, will he break some long runs? Absolutely. And he'll have a couple good weeks, but are you going to get a consistent 75 plus yards and a touchdown every week on the ground from James Cook? I don't think so.
Right. Yeah. And I think you're playing with fire, right?
He's too small.
That's what you're doing. Yeah. And the thing is too, like you still have, the Josh Allen factor, obviously there for short yardage. You have a couple of tight ends that could take care of short yardage at the goal line, which I think hurts James Cook's case. And that's kind of the reason I stayed away from him late on the drafting season, Brian, because he was going so much higher and people were believing like, okay, this is going to be a 3-down type guy that I'm getting at a discount. Well, really, you're paying up for an inconsistent potential 3-down guy. And I think that's what's going to happen with James Cook again this season. Could be wrong, but that's the way I see it right now.
You drafted him like he's Thurman Thomas, you know. And
right, yeah, you can't do that. You cannot do that at all. Other team that played on Monday Night Football was the New York Jets. A lot to unpack, obviously, with the Rodgers injury. Your thoughts on the backfield here specifically? Breece Hall, 10 carries, 127 yards, which you say, oh, bulky, that sounds great. Well, remember, 83 of them came on 1 carry. But you take that away, I mean, that's still 9 carries for what, 44 yards, which is pretty solid, and you'll take that. He had 1 catch for 20 yards. We can bring Dalvin Cook into this as well. I don't know how you feel about starting either one of these guys this week. I know in the majority of my Breece Hall leagues, he's going to be out there, Brian.
Yep.
The majority of my Dalvin Cook leagues, he's probably going to be on the bench. Is that the proper way to handle it?
100%. That's what I would do too. Is you drafted Dalvin Cook because you were wondering, well, maybe Breece Hall doesn't play, maybe he re-aggravates the injury. I didn't buy for a second the nonsense that Ian Rappaport was spitting out there of they brought Dalvin Cook in and he's going to be the early down back, and that's what they told him, blah, blah, blah. That's nonsense. Dalvin Cook showed up in Florham Park like August 29th was his first practice there. He had a baby. That's why he stayed away. They let him stay home with the kid and all that. The guy's practiced like 3 times with the team. You think he's going to come in? He's going to be your lead back all of a sudden? It's ridiculous. Meanwhile, Breece Hall's been there the whole time, just ramping up at certain levels. Breece Hall's a home run hitter. We saw it Monday night. That's why you drafted him. If Breece Hall was healthy, Breece Hall would have been a top 5 pick in fantasy football.
Maybe 101. Maybe 101.
Next year, he probably will be. So, we'll see. You hit the nail on the head, though, Eric. Yeah, Breece Hall, you put him out there. You see what he's going to do. This is going to be a running team. As long as Zach Wilson's the quarterback, they're not throwing the football. What are you, crazy? Have you seen that kid play? He shouldn't be in the CFL. So, they're going to be pounding. And maybe it gives Cook a little more value now. He didn't look great, but, volume cures a lot of ills. And maybe Dalvin Cook's going to get that volume now.
What about Baltimore with I think we touched on this earlier just for a brief moment. John Harbaugh said Melvin Gordon is here for a reason. Well, he's on the practice squad, so John, so just slow your roll there. But just wide scope it here. Justice Hill was super popular on waivers. Gus Edwards was out there in a few leagues, and I got him. I'm sure you got him as well. I think you said. But you look at the Ravens running back situation. We're trying to acquire the pieces on our roster, but what about starting them in week 2? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I lost J.K. Dobbins on a team that I care more about than anything, and I got Gus Edwards off the waiver wire. Justice Hill went ahead of Gus Edwards, so I'm fine with that. Listen, you know what you're getting with Gus Edwards. The guy's caught 18 balls in 5 years. That's not what he's out there for. What was puzzling was to see that, Hill got the majority of the goal line work, but I think some of that comes down to this. When J.K. Dobbins got hurt, I believe it was a goal line situation, and the next play, Justice Hill came right in, and then they scored.
Okay.
It was very close. Like I want to say he left the game, and then Hill came in and just scored. Because I was going to tweet about it like, oh, Dobbins gets you all the way down there and Justice Hill bogarts it. So is Justice Hill a special talent? No. Is he going to catch more passes than Gus Edwards? Yeah. So in a PPR league, I can see getting him out there as a flex. I don't think you're going to want either guy, to be honest, as your RB1 or RB2. Gus Edwards is going to fall into that camp of guys we talked about already of it's a bye week. I'm desperate. I need somebody to play at this point because you're still dealing with Lamar. And he's going to siphon a bunch of touches at the goal line too. So we'll see. But Justice Hill's been on this team for years. He's not a special talent. He's not someone who's going to command the football. So I think as we go forward, Gus will carve out his role as just the grinder on this team. And he'll be fine. He's not going to win you a week. But when he scores, you're going to be happy that you had him on your roster.
Absolutely, you will. Now, we have this breaking news, and thanks to our very own Tyler Soto, who is the man behind the glass tonight, giving us this information, or at least giving me this information. But Adam Schefter actually just tweeted out, and I just noticed we don't have this on the rundown, so this is a good time to talk about it. Adam Schefter from ESPN just tweeted out that Puka Nacua, the waiver wire darling, did not practice today due to an oblique injury. An oblique injury to me, like I think about my fantasy baseball and I'm like, oh my God, that's going to knock you out for several weeks. I don't know how it affects you in football. The fact that he didn't practice today, and I think he practiced yesterday, this is a midweek downgrade. This is not good, Brian.
Yeah. And I mean, you've almost never seen anything like this Puka Nacua hype. Shout out to my guy, Brett Whitefield at Fantasy Points, who has been talking him up for months. He's been telling people to draft Puka Nacua. And really, I mean, the guy got 15 targets. He hit 34% of the air yards for the team. He was unbelievable. He was everything to that offense. if he doesn't play this week, oh boy. And I dropped Van Jefferson in a few leagues because I go, you know what? Van Jefferson, he doesn't command the football. Why would you ever want to put him out there? He's not special. How is he going to help your fantasy team? Well, something to watch very closely Friday in the practice report.
That's going to be huge. I just looked at the injury report from yesterday, and Nakua was not listed on it. So this is a midweek downgrade. This is officially a midweek downgrade. This is the kind of stuff like, okay, well, he clearly hurt himself at practice, which it looks like he did. And I think
that's carrying all those fantasy teams.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I'm surprised it wasn't a broken back. You have Friday's practice to get ready. I believe. Do you know when that game is? That is a Sunday afternoon game, right? They don't play like Sunday night or I think don't we have a doubleheader in Monday Night Football this week too?
They are 4:05 at home against 49ers.
Yeah, that's rough because you might have to make a decision at 1 p.m. on Sunday, which it's not going to be ideal, obviously. Yeah, we do have a Monday night doubleheader this week.
Yeah, it's only 4 o'clock games.
Yeah,
and there's the Sunday nighter and the two Monday night games stink. But
I guess the advice is like if Bourne's still out there, I mean, obviously pick him up.
Allen Robinson, another guy.
Robinson would be good. Rashid Shaheed, Calvin Austin, if you're nasty, as the kids say.
You got to think, though, if you just picked up Puka Nacua, you got to have somebody else because you didn't start him last week. So
yeah, that's a good point. Unless you had like a Cooper Kupp team and you went balls out on Nacua, I could see that as well. But yeah, like Rashid Shaheed, I don't know if there's any fantasy value in Carolina. If Adam Thielen's out there, okay, maybe. Elijah Moore, if he's out there, he's probably not in Cleveland, but that's about it there. But yeah, I mean, and then if you look at those late games on Sunday, I don't think you want to start Marvin Mims. I don't think you want to. I mean, Gallup's interesting if Cooks misses. So if you're deciding between Cooks and Nacua and you have the room for Gallup, okay, well that might be interesting there.
I think it goes back to those Steelers guys. If you're counting on Nacua, you got to get one of those Steelers guys Monday night.
Yeah, I think you're right. So we'll follow that. If there's any more news coming up in the second hour of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show, we'll be sure to bring it to you right here live on the Better Sports Network. Coming up next, where does Brian Drake stand on players like Javonte Williams, Dallas Goedert, Justin Fields, Drake London, and more? That is coming up. He's Brian Drake from the Fantasy Football Hustle, Fighting Chance Fantasy, Fantasy Points, and what was the other one? Sportskeeda Pro Football, right?
Sportskeeda, we're on there. My guy Tony Pauline, draft expert, got me.
Yes, I saw that. Good for that is awesome. So a lot of good stuff that's churning out there. A lot of good stuff that's churning out here on the second half of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show. Brian Drake, Eric Balkman will be back right after this.
What can we expect from you out there on the track tonight?
Listen, I have a wife, 2 kids. I have, full-time jobs. I'm never nervous. I don't even know what that word means. Can you explain what nervous means? No. I'm ready to have fun. I've never done anything like this before. I got asked to be a part of this. This is fascinating. Like, it's so cool to just look around and see what goes on here. So I'm just excited to get out on the horse. And you want trash talk? Is that what you're asking me for? No trash talk. I hope everyone does well.
All right. Everyone's going to do well, but it has to be a winner. So give me your trifecta. Who's going to come in first, second, and third? Heat.
I will go Maria 1, me 2, Willie 3, Moose goes 4th.
Well, it's very simple. I won this event last year. I won my heat, and so the defending champ has to be the favorite. Now, that makes me a little nervous just because I feel like it's hard to repeat. There's a little pressure when you're the favorite, but that being said, I'm still optimistic.
So your heat, it's you,
yes.
Moose and Keith from Better Sports Network, and Willie Colon.
I think Keith might be my stiffest competition, and I asked for this because I actually recruited Keith, if you didn't know. So Keith, if you win, you're welcome.
Malusis is very good. I mean, he knows what he's doing, but I'm going to go with Maria.
Keith is waving to the crowd. He must pay attention because they're off. It's Mark Malusis going for the lead. Maria Marino on the outside, and now Keith Irizarry on the outside with speed, and they're 3 wide into the first turn. Woo! Mark Malusis is locked in for his life. 138 and 2. They're into the stretch. Sportscasters Derby 2. And still in front, Keith Irizarry. And now Mark Malusis is trying to squeeze on through.
Come on! Back! Come on! Let's go! Come on, dig it! Yeah!
Keith there is Eric. Keith, you did it all the way, wire to wire, over Mark Malusis.
Awesome! That was so cool.
The champ is here. Keith, what was it like being out there? Adrenaline rush. You were doing the Instagram live, so there was no panic. You looked cool, calm, collected the whole time, and you won it.
I felt really comfortable. I did. Like, I know you were joking with me before. Are you nervous? Are you whatever? What are you? David, the driver, was awesome. He's like, we're going to win this. I said, all right, let's win this. And he said, let's go. Yeah, I just felt really comfortable. I did. It was fun. We're in the lead. I got Maria Marino on the right side of me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, she's going to beat us, right? And then out of nowhere, you see Moose coming up this way, and we feel him breathing down our neck. And I'm like,
Moose
no,
on the loose. Watch out.
Moose was definitely on the loose, and we just got Moose by a neck, a nose, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, but again, all of this for a great cause, and it was absolutely awesome to do this. It was cool.
All right, Keith, congratulations. And no matter what, you could always hold this over Moose's head.
Yeah!
High Stakes Fantasy Football Show rolls on here, 7:07 in the PM. We only have minutes to kick off tonight of week 2 between the Philadelphia Eagles and the Minnesota Vikings. A lot of fantasy stuff going on in that game too. Jalen Hurts, Kirk Cousins, Justin Jefferson, Alexander Madison. You have, DeAndre Swift, Dallas Goedert, AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, Jordan Addison. It's insane. Like how many different players we're going to have going on for fantasy tonight. I have not looked at the total on this game. Brian Drake, who's joining me from Fighting Chance Fantasy, Sportskeeda, Pro Football, the Fantasy Football Hustle and Fantasy Points. When you are looking to submit your lineups, are you looking at totals and spreads at all?
If I wanted to sound like a smart, sharp insider, I would say yes, but I don't. I
don't
really
at all.
Don't.
Okay. 48.5, by the way, tonight is the total in the game. Eagles are 5.5-point favorites. So you got to be feeling good about your Eagles tonight to go to 2-0.
No, I don't. I was just at an ice cream social with my next door neighbor. Our kids, our elementary school had something going on right before we went on the air. And I told him, I go, Eagles are going to lose tonight. And he's like, what? He's like, you don't talk like that. I go, dude, we're missing 3 players on defense. Offense looked awful. Brian Johnson, the new offensive coordinator, I would give him an F- for his job calling plays last week. It was abysmal. So we need to see this offensive line play a little better. We're down a running back. We're down a corner. We're down a linebacker. We're down a safety. If Justin Jefferson and these receivers can kind of get going over the middle, I'm calling for a big Hawkinson night right now. I'm saying Hawkinson goes over 100 yards. Jordan Addison scores a touchdown. I'm giving you my preview right there.
Wow. Okay. Interesting stuff.
I'm going to say Vikings win 23-20.
23-20. This is fast. The Vikings lived in the periphery last year where they were winning every single one-score game. And then sure enough, this past week, they finally lose a one-score game to Tampa. But maybe they get back on the winning track tonight. Now, this coming from an Eagles fan. So I want everybody to understand Brian Drake from the Fantasy Football Hustle, Fighting Chance Fantasy, Sportskeeda, and a Fantasy Points. Telling you right now, he's very nervous about his Eagles tonight, who are a 5.5-point favorite, 48.5 on the total on this. Hey, let's help out AS in the YouTube chat. Just popped in right now with a lineup discussion. He needs to pick 3 of these players: DeAndre Hopkins, Najee Harris, DeAndre Swift, Isaiah Pacheco, and Josh Kelly. And as he says, DeAndre Hopkins could be out. So I think the way I would roll with this, because Swift plays tonight, and this is half-point PPR, I think I would put Swift in my starting lineup, Brian. And then, I'd probably be, if Eckler plays, then you bench Kelly. If he doesn't play, you bench Pacheco. But and obviously, if Hopkins doesn't play, he's an easy bench, right? So I would look at it from this standpoint. Optimally, I would put in Swift, Harris, and Hopkins, right? But if Hopkins misses, then you put in Kelly. And if Kelly's not, if Eckler plays, then you put in Pacheco, right?
I don't know. I think, to me, I'm rolling with those 3 running backs and just waiting to see what happens with Harris, Kelly, Pacheco, and then I don't know what I'm going to get out of Swift at this point. He could come out tonight and they could blow it away, and he could have 100 yards total offense and score 2 touchdowns, and I look like an idiot. But I mean, if you take Swift out of the equation, even if Hopkins doesn't play, you have 3 starting running backs that are going to play: Pacheco, Kelly, and Harris. Is there massive upside? I mean, maybe not, because Pacheco could dud out, and Kelly is. We've seen that before where guys we thought were going to get massive roles don't. But I like Kelly a lot. I'm trying to squeeze him into a ton of lineups if I can. Harris didn't look great on a bad offense, but that's what I do. And then if Hopkins plays, you take out one of the running backs. But
that's a good point. I think you bring it up. So bench Swift, and then roll with Harris, Pacheco, and Kelly. And then if Eckler doesn't play, you can put in Hopkins. I guess the only question is, like, if Hopkins misses and Eckler plays, then if you leave Swift out, I guess you just got to roll with Kelly at that point and just hope.
Yeah, I mean, do we think
in the first hour that they want to use 2 running backs for the Chargers?
Yeah. So, I mean, Kelly could easily outperform DeAndre Swift if they both have the same sort of role. I mean, Swift has to still deal with Jalen Hurts, still has to deal with Boston Scott, and still has to deal with Rashad Penny. So it's not like he's this goal line back. I don't know if they're going to put him in on the goal line. I mean, we've seen them use Boston Scott on the goal line a number of times, and he's 5'8", 180. I don't know, who knows how much he weighs, but
and I think that's the thing. So hopefully that helps you, AS. Like when you look at it from the standpoint of, okay, if you bench Swift tonight and Eckler plays, there's still a lot to like about Joshua Kelly, and maybe even more so to like about Joshua Kelly, even if Eckler plays, than what you have with DeAndre Swift tonight. I think that's the way to look at it. Ian Phillips also chiming in on the YouTube chat tonight. He wants us to pick 2 between Jordan Addison, Alexander Madison, and then Joshua Kelly from the Chargers. Now, obviously, 2 of these guys are in action tonight in Addison and Madison. He does not specify half-point PPR or full PPR or standard. I know you like Kelly at this point. If it's full PPR, I think you got to put Addison in there, but half or standard, I think it's Madison and Kelly. Would you be willing to bench Jordan Addison in favor of Joshua Kelly, knowing what we know at this moment?
I'm not playing both Vikings. I'm not putting all my eggs in that one basket. I think I'd roll Addison just for the fact that Bradbury's not playing tonight, and there's going to be, second-year UDFA. Josh Jobe is going to be playing one of the corners. So I think they want to get Slay on Jefferson as much as they can, but they're going to move him around. I think I'd go Addison and Kelly and just try to split the difference between, get some of the production from Minnesota. But what if Minnesota bombs out, and they lose 40-0 like the Giants just did? And then you're stuck and you're like, oh my God, I got nothing out of either guy.
Yeah.
I mean, if they're losing and we think the Eagles are a good team, they're going to have to throw. They only throw to 3 guys. So Addison's going to be one of them.
All right. So it's probably Addison and Kelly then, just in case that we have a giant situation from Sunday Night Football on Thursday Night Football this week, and we know there's a non-zero chance of anything. You're nervous about your Eagles. I get it, but I'm sure there's plenty of Vikings fans nervous about dropping to 0-2 on the season to kick things off. So hopefully that helps, Ian. Where does Brian Drake stand on certain players? Let's get into it. The Bengals offense, my goodness. What happened week 1? Was this just a case of Joe Burrow trying to knock off the rust, that these guys were not on the same page? Higgins, I can't remember the last time he put up a 0. Obviously, Jamar Chase was bad. Mixon, Irv Smith, Burrow. I mean, the list goes on. Where do you stand on the Bengals offense? Was it a one-off, or is this something that gives you cause for concern going through the rest of the season here?
Yeah, it's just one of those kind of burn the tape games. And when you talk about T. Higgins, 8 targets, he does nothing. I mean, you could think back to a year ago. Devonta Smith didn't do anything the first week either. I think he had a 0. So, it happens. We in fantasy want every week to be perfect. We want every week to be 100 yards and a touchdown. And that's just not realistic for football. That's just not how the game's played. So, yeah, they'll bounce back. I mean, Joe Burrow is amazing. He didn't play at all, basically, once that calf injury hit. Same thing with Jalen Hurts. Why did he look so terrible? I don't know. The guy hasn't taken a real snap since the Super Bowl, basically.
Yeah.
They'll turn it around. This is training camp for these guys. These first 4 weeks. We in fantasy want everyone to be amazing from day one. None of these guys play in the preseason. This is training camp right now. This is game 2 of training camp, essentially, for Jalen Hurts. So I think the Bengals will bounce back.
Okay, and it's interesting you say that because I remember for years with the Packers, with Matt LaFleur and Aaron Rodgers, they refused to play starters in the preseason, which I always stump for. I like, don't get hurt in the preseason when you're in Super Bowl window. But week 1 came around like literally every year, and they sucked, and nobody knew why they were sucking so bad. And I said, maybe it's because the quarterback was not on the same page with his receivers, his pass catchers, because they didn't play at all in the preseason. So I think there's something to be said for that. I have a significant amount of Bengals. I am pretty much playing them everywhere. Let me ask you this. I do another fantasy football show locally here in Wisconsin. Brian, I got a couple of questions tonight. Joe Burrow or Tua Tagovailoa? Tagovailoa playing against the Patriots this week, and who was the quarterback 1 last week of all quarterbacks, right? And Burrow, who was the biggest stinker out there. Would you be willing to sit Burrow this week for Tagovailoa?
Whoa, that is brutal.
It's tough. It's a really
DeAndre
tough
Swift
call.
getting the start, by the way.
Okay, perfect. This is excellent. Where did you get that from?
I'm watching the game.
You're what? Oh God, the game's on already. I got to get this on. I'm sorry. Go ahead and answer.
Boy, that's tough. I mean, they could both go off and go insane. But how do you go away from Tua after a week like that? I think you got to give them a shot again. I mean, that their whole offense is they don't run the ball. They pretend they want to, but Mostert had an ankle injury. He returned to practice this week. They're just going to throw and throw and throw to just 2 guys. That's their whole lot. Isn't it amazing how efficient they are and how many points and yards they put up? They throw to 2 guys. That's it.
Yeah, that's crazy. It's crazy to think about. But that's the world we're living in at this point. That's good knowledge on the Bengals. Javonte Williams. What a wild ride we've been on with him this offseason in regards to how significant his injury was, then how fast he was recovering, then his coach talking about how much action he was going to get, and the fact that the Broncos didn't do anything significant in free agency and the draft. Where do you stand right now on Javonte Williams going forward based on what you saw week 1, Brian?
I love Javonte. And by the way, if you ever people want to know why DeAndre Swift doesn't play a lot, on the second play of the game, he just had a horrific pass blocking assignment, and it made Jalen Hurts scramble and basically get sacked in the backfield because Swift can't block anybody. But when you're talking about a guy that I'm really into, and that's Javonte Williams, he's coming off the injury. We thought, what's he gonna do? Maybe not much. Oh no, they're getting the guy out there with a ton of touches. He's led the team in targets. I think it was 13 carries. This is only going to improve. I'm saying if you can go buy Javonte right now, he's a great trade for candidate. He didn't do anything spectacular. So the guy who has him isn't like, oh man, I've got this amazing asset here. But folks, you have the number 1 option in a Sean Payton offense. Yeah, they're going to split some with Samaje Perine. Javonte's a superior talent. Like, don't get it twisted. He is. So once the season starts going and he gets stronger and stronger, he's going to be, I believe, an RB1 for the season. Look at those targets they're giving him. It's great.
It's one of those guys, too, that, like, you don't really think about during drafting season. I mean, I drafted him in a significant amount of spots, Brian, because I kept hearing what Sean Payton was saying about him. I kept hearing what the coaching staff was saying, and they're very positive about the injury and how fast he was coming back. And at that point, you got to start ignoring like what your preconceived notions are about how terrible his knee injury was. Mm-hmm. And then he ends up playing more than expected in the preseason. And so, yeah, I'm firing him up in quite a lot of spots. We won't think about draft ADP when it comes to be week 15, 16, 17, that 3-week sprint of the FFPC main event, the Fantasy Pros Championship, when all that, that those 2 $6 million prize pools are going to be awarded. But it could become to one of those teams who ends up winning the $1 million grand prize. And it's like, God, how did they get Javonte Williams so late? Well, it's because everybody else was downgrading him because of the injury. And it might be one of those things we think of then. We're not necessarily thinking of right now. Dallas Goedert. Go ahead.
Goedert just caught it. All you high stakes guys who are tight end premium, rejoice. Dallas Goedert caught his first pass of the season. I believe it went for -1 yard, but He caught a pass.
That's still 1.4 points, baby. That's still 1.4 points. We love it. We love it. Go ahead. Let's talk about Dallas Goedert.
Devontae Smith just caught a bomb inside the 10-yard line. So the first and goal for the Eagles. Now we'll get to see.
You are way ahead of me on my feed right now.
Oh, sorry.
I just saw the Goddard pass. That's okay. You can spoil it for me. That's fine.
And now this will be interesting. So let's check this out, Eric, and let's see who this goal line back is. So Devonta Smith is down at the 10-yard line. Let's see who the Eagles have in the backfield for these snaps in the 10. Let's see. And it's DeAndre Swift. I'm surprised. I thought that would be Boston Scott right now.
Or even Rashad Penny. Man, like Swift would have been my third choice.
Yeah.
I'm honestly surprised to hear that. Well, give us the updates on that while you talk about the dude who just got the -1 receiving yardage for Dallas Goedert. Can you tell us a little bit about how you feel about him, given that he's got two prolific pass catchers on the perimeter in A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith? Is this a guy you still roll out every single week and start as your tight end?
Oh, yeah. And I was big on Dallas Goedert in the preseason. I was talking up how, listen, before he got hurt, he was a top 4 option at the tight end position. And, all his metrics were off the charts. He just got hurt. And when he got hurt, and then Devonta Smith really rose to prominence after the Goddard injury. But when he's healthy, and that's a big if because he gets hurt every single year, Dallas Goedert is a top 7 quarterback. And you guys I'm not telling you anything you don't know. These guys who play in tight end premium, you're as tuned into tight ends as anybody out there. It's like our buddy Andrew Cooper from
Tight End Whisperer from Fantasy Alarm. Man.
Absolutely. Coop knows all about the tight ends from the Fantasy Alarm here on Better Sports Network. See, look at that cross plug we're giving right there.
Oh yeah, it's all about synergy for sure. Titans backfield. Let's briefly talk about this. As I got the second down play up right now. And
Eagles Swift? Are going to 4th down. Eagles are going to kick a field goal here.
Oh, that's so Brian Johnson failing again for you, right?
Yeah, they had a 3rd and goal, and they ran a Jalen Hurts RPO to the short side, and there were 2 defenders standing there waiting for him, and he just went down. Josh Allen should put on tape of Jalen Hurts this year. Because Jalen Hurts is taking sacks. He doesn't care. He's walking out of bounds. He's going down. He's got his money. It's 3-0 Eagles. Jake Elliott with a field goal. So he's just getting – Josh Allen is still trying to jump over dudes. Like, what are you doing? Just stop. Go down.
You're a grown-ass man. That at this point, you have to start making better decisions. And I think the Bills want him to as well. Titans backfield as we head to the first break, 10 minutes to go in the first quarter, 3-0 Eagles, as you heard from Brian Drake, on the shoulders or the leg, as it were, of a Jake Elliott field goal. Did I see that Tyjae Spears either out-touched or out-snapped Derrick Henry this past week, which is crazy to think about? Where do you stand on I mean, I guess if you drafted Derrick Henry, you got to roll him out there, but does Tyjae Spears have a role in this offense, even if Henry's healthy?
There's no question about it. This was the lowest snap count for Henry in, I believe, 3 years. There's only been 2 times in his career he's had less snaps than what he had this week. Yeah, I mean, this is a team that drafted Tyjae Spears to get some more juice on the field in the pass game. This offensive line is so bad. Go look at all these line gurus who do the breakdowns of offensive lines. They're always putting the Titans either at 31 or 32. They stink. And I think some of them are already hurt. So if you're not getting anything out of Henry in the pass game, and we always see the one great screen pass he takes down the sideline, there's a highlight, and Kyle Brandt puts him on his angry runs, all that fun stuff. But Spears is going to play. They want the juice on the field. He's going to, be out there in all the 2-minute work because, Derrick Henry's not a passing down back. So
right.
And it's a terrible team. Guess what they're going to do? They're going to be a negative game script, and Tyjae Spears is going to play. If he's on your waiver wires in your season-long leagues, and I know we speak to a lot of high-stakes folks here who probably already have him drafted, but there's a lot of other leagues you might play in. Get him on your roster right now. An aging Derrick Henry who, what if something does finally happen to Derrick Henry? Eventually he's going to break down, And when that injury happens, you've got this electric little lightning bug in the backfield. I'm all for it. Get him on the roster. I'm pissed I don't have more Tajay Spears.
Yeah, I kind of am too. Like, I drafted him in a couple of dynasty leagues. Well, more than a couple of dynasty leagues back in May. And I felt like that was enough for me. And then as the season went on, I'm like, God, I should have more Spears. I should have more Spears. And I don't. And that's what I'm resigned to at this point, which is fine. I just got to figure things out here going forward. At least I'm not super heavy on Derrick Henry and Dynasty, which I think would be really bad at this point. Justin Fields did not look great against the Green Bay Packers. Failed to pepper DJ Moore with a lot of targets. I don't know if this is a coaching thing. I don't know if it's a Justin Fields thing. I've watched several YouTube videos about Fields' approach and his performance during the game, and they've all been pretty resoundingly like bad reviews on Justin Fields. Are you nervous at all if you drafted Justin Fields as your number one quarterback? Again, let's just scope this specifically into fantasy here, Brian. Are you nervous at all about Fields? I mean, are his legs going to be enough to get it done for you this year? Or is this more of a wide scoping problem here?
I mean, geez Louise. Maybe it's just that Justin Fields isn't good. And I think that kind of is the case. There's not a lot of talent on the offensive line. There's, you got Roshan Johnson's probably your best back. He's a rookie. You spent all this draft capital to go get DJ Moore, and you give him 2 targets. What are we doing? I think the coaching's bad. I don't think Eberflus is a great play. I don't know why they hired him. And the ownership doesn't care. They're a million years old. So it's just kind of this rudderless ship in Chicago that's just going to keep going on. And I feel bad for that fan base. Justin Fields stinks. He had all that talent around him in college. And, that's kind of what he was banking on. And I liked him coming out of Ohio State, but he hasn't improved in years. There's no improvement.
What about, I mean, so I think the fact that he basically was such a prolific passer at Ohio State, that hasn't translated to the pros. Have we seen enough of a sample size to say, okay, it's just not going to happen for him in the NFL?
I mean, in Ohio State, you got a bunch of first-round draft pick wide receivers. Everybody's running wide open. You're running this spread offense on the wide hashes. There's a million quarterbacks that look great in college because there's no defense. And, it's just good luck. And you play in the Big Ten again. You play one good team a year. So, I mean, it's true. Yeah, you play Michigan. That's your game. If you win that, you go to the playoff. But, I mean, it's tough with him. For fantasy, I get it. You want him to run, but this is a guy that barely threw for over 2,000 yards last season. And is he going to run for 1,000 again this year? I doubt it. Because teams got tape on him. They know what he's trying to do. If you remember back in the day when Michael Vick played for the Falcons and he played in the NFC Championship game against these same Philadelphia Eagles that are playing tonight, they played this umbrella defense against him. They made Michael Vick throw the football. And they're like, no, you're not going to run on us. And I think that's what teams are going to do to Justin Fields. And they're going to say, hey, beat us with your arm because we know you can't. And until he does, that's what teams should do. Just say, Go ahead and throw, please, by all means. Be 3 and out real quick.
We got our producer Tyler Soto, who you can follow on X at Heavy T on air. He said that the Bears will get the number 1 pick, somehow pass on both Caleb Williams and Shadur Sanders out of Colorado, and draft some random guy at Boston College. That seems about right, unless they trade the pick again, which is there's a non-zero chance of that happening as well. Drake London, Atlanta Falcons. He gets the bagel last week. Are we concerned? I mean, it's a one-off. I don't think he gets 0 for 0 against Green Bay this week, but starting Drake London, there's got to be a little bit of trepidation here, Brian.
I did a show on Sirius XM last year, right after all the Sunday night games, and I had a segment called Hate the Drake. And in that segment, I would do basically the players that crap the bed. It was a fun segment. We'd have like sound effects and whatever. Drake London literally had his mail forwarded to the Hate the Drake list. Like, it was every week he's on this show. This guy ran 91% of the routes for the Falcons. He got 6% of the targets. I mean, What are we doing? You're drafting all these guys in the first round. You can't get them the football. Desmond Ridder is awful. I had some metrics I tweeted out, and this is back when it still was Twitter, so I can call it that.
Mm-hmm.
And his numbers were worse than Mariota, and Mariota is an abject failure at throwing the football. So I have no pity for anybody who took these guys. I don't have London. I don't have Pitts. I wouldn't trade for them. Like, it's over. It's over for these guys until they get a new head coach, because the play caller is not going to change. He wants to run the football. That's why they spent that first round pick this year on Bijan. And, good luck.
The thing that always irritates me about Arthur Smith is this is a guy who came up as a tight ends coach for the Titans, was the OC there. And I feel like he's for lack of a better term, he's cheating on us by not giving Kyle Pitts all these targets in Atlanta. And I don't think you necessarily need a franchise quarterback to funnel targets into Kyle Pitts. Quite frankly, you could get a capable guy and funnel targets into both Pitts and London in Atlanta. That's not happening. And that's what's frustrating for me. Drake London should never go 0 catches for 0 yards. It should never happen. It happened last week. Might happen again yet this season, and that's the frustrating thing.
Could you imagine if Drake London was on the Kansas City Chiefs?
Oh, my God. He'd be a second-round pick.
Instead of Kadarius Toney and Sky Moore.
Yes, absolutely. People would go gaga over him. It's crazy to think about. Don't tease me with that, Brian. Just now, that's all I can think about.
Think about Mike Evans getting traded, because that's going to happen this year.
That could happen, too, as well, and that'll be fun when it does. Buffalo Bills, let's talk about them briefly before we get into the final segment here. Maybe it's just a one-off, and I know the Jets defense is really good, but one of my buddies pointed out that since Dayball has left Buffalo, Josh Allen is I think he's averaging like 2 turnovers a game. We know, or at least we think we know, Diggs is pretty ticked off about Josh Allen and his preparation and, how focused he is on the game every week. We know that we thought they had a good number 2 receiver in Gabe Davis, and yet they traded up in the draft to draft Dalton Kincaid this year. The backfield is kind of a mess again. We talked about James Cook in the first hour. Where do you stand, Brian Drake, on the Buffalo Bills at this point? Are they good? Are they bad? Are they an elite offense? Are they just a good offense? Are they an average offense?
They miss Brian Daboll something fierce, because it's a situation where you look at the Bills' last 3 games that counted. They lost to Zach Wilson. I mean, come on. Zach Wilson just beat you in Buffalo. Give me a break. You no-showed a playoff game against the Bengals, and you needed a fourth-quarter comeback to beat Skylar Thompson and the Dolphins. Those are their last three games. I mean, that's awful. Is Josh Allen, is he doing too many commercials? Is he getting a little too big for his britches out here? I mean, I live in upstate New York, a few hours down the road from Buffalo in Syracuse, and Josh Allen stuff's everywhere. I mean, he promotes everything. So maybe, there's something to that, but I still think they're one weapon away. That's where Mike Evans needs to go, is to Buffalo. They need one more guy, because I feel like Diggs, as electric as he is, he's not a possession guy. He being Josh Allen misses that binky of Cole Beasley.
You could make the case that Diggs is actually the possession guy and Evans is the lid lifter, right? Evans could be the big play guy in that offense. And maybe that's something too, like that they could switch back and forth, based on what the coverage is going to be, what the coverage is dictating on any given play. Because I think Evans and Diggs both have that in their repertoire, maybe not to do it consistently week after week. But I think if you're talking about a Bills offense with Diggs on one side, Evans on the other, Kincaid at tight end, you mix in Gabe Davis or whatever, that is formidable, very formidable.
Yeah, because Gabe Davis would be better. I think it's just that shot play guy instead of you're relying on him, week to week. So I don't know. We'll see. But it's not good in Buffalo. I don't think Ken Dorsey is a very good OC. They, like we said, they rely on, Josh Allen, as I always say, they want him to put the Superman cape on, and they want him to just, put the team on his back. And maybe that's why he's still doing all these goofy things and trying to jump over people and be crazy out there, because they tell him he has to. And I don't know. It's not good right now in Buffalo. And if he loses this week, I think you're really going to start to see some people questioning the Bills going forward and the way this team's constructed.
I think for fantasy purposes, you drafted Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs where you did. You have to start them going forward. After that, all bets are off. I mean, James Cook, Dalton Kincaid, Gabe Davis, they all kind of got to show you something before you start cementing them into your lineups as well. Hey, listen, we got the game underway here. We're giving you live updates from the Eagles and Vikings. Eagles up 3-0 right now, about 7 minutes to go in the first quarter. Looks like you could probably tell me better than this, Brian. Did the Eagles just punt, basically? I believe I saw they had a fourth down deep in their own territory, so I think they punted it away.
They did.
Okay,
yes.
Perfect.
And it looks like they got and their returner, the Vikings returner fumbled, and the Eagles recovered the ball.
Oh my God! This is why we do this show. Then, okay, this is perfect. I'm about to see the play right
Powell fumbles. I was actually trying to write a funny tweet at the moment that just came to me. Yes, and the Eagles recover. So the Eagles have the ball. It'll be first down for Philadelphia. Am I live? I don't know if I am.
You know, it's funny because that Powell had about a 25-yard return on that to almost the Eagles' 30-yard line, and he coughed it up there, and it was a legit fumble. So it looks like the Eagles will take over basically 10, 15 yards ahead of where they had it before they had to punt.
And they're running Swift. Swift is getting some run here. They're heating them up a little bit. So
more on that. Plus, we're going to talk more about week 2 lineup advice. We're going to talk about the Steelers receivers, Kendrick Bourne. We're going to break him down as well as what's going on with the Las Vegas Raiders, Jacoby Myers, Devontae Adams, and then the Puka Nacua Tutu Atwell theorem. We're going to get into that as well. He's Brian Drake. He's from the Fantasy Football Hustle, Sportskeeda, Pro Football. You're looking at Fighting Chance Fantasy and Fantasy Points for him. Follow him on X at Drake Fantasy. I'm Eric Balkman from the HSFF Hour and the FFPC, the Road of His High Stakes Lowdown. Don't go anywhere. We got a lot of emotional stuff going on with this game and a lot of stuff we got to break down for week 2.
I need another beer.
Exactly. So Brian needs another beer. High Stakes Fantasy Football Show rolls on the BSN right after this.
Oh boy, we got a big one. We got a big card here. We got
let's go.
We got a super rookie.
Ooh.
Do you guys want to guess who the big card super rookie is? Because
I'm going to guess somebody from the Dallas Cowboys, but I don't recall who were rookies in those particular years. So I'm going to guess Michael Irvin.
Adam?
Jared kind of convinced me to go Troy Aikman there.
I'm going to read the description. In this player's NFL debut, September 10th, 1989, he produced an electrifying 68-yard punt return for a touchdown.
Sanders.
He became the first athlete in the 20th century to hit a home run, September 5th, 1989, for the Yankees at Seattle, and score a touchdown in the same week.
That needs a sleeve. That one needs a sleeve.
Top
100%.
super rookie, neon, prime time, Deion Sanders.
I wasn't that far off. He played for the Cowboys.
I was going to say Deion, and then when you said the early 90s Cowboys, I'm like, Aikman would be a good guess. So I go with your gut is the lesson there.
And there it is, the white and red Falcon jerseys that you said Deion came in with before they changed to black.
That was because the starting lineup for Deion his rookie year has got the red helmet with the white jersey.
Now look at that do. I mean, are you kidding me with that hair?
I mean, you got to have a headband with those curls. You got to.
That is sick. And this is a favorite card. Do we have any value on this card? We have to, right?
Let me see.
Give me a value here.
Let's see here on eBay. PSA 10 gem mint Deion Sanders, $149.99. And then a 9.5 is $6. So that guy might be a little bit then there's a much more reasonably listed one at $31 for a PSA 10. So it's got some value to it. Yeah, you might want to protect that one.
It's in excellent condition. I guess we have to worry about, is it centered?
Yes, that would be the next thing.
All right, well, we'll go through the process there. Maybe I'll just frame that one as a great moment in this show's history.
3:38 to go in the first quarter here with the Eagles leading the Vikings 3-0 fantasy football night in America on the Better Sports Network. Rolling on here with the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show. Eric Balkman from the FFPC, HSFF, Road of His High Stakes Lowdown. That's me. Brian Drake from Fighting Chance Fantasy, Sportskeeda, Pro Football, as well as Fantasy Points and Fighting Chance Fantasy. Did I cover all 4? You got 4 big ones, Brian.
Yeah, they're all over them. That's fine. It's all right. There's so many to do. The big thing, if anybody wants to come hang out, I do a podcast with Joe Dolan called the 2 Point Stance for Fantasy Points. It's on wherever you get your podcasts, look up Fantasy Points, or on YouTube. We have the Fantasy Points podcast feed. So we just did a new show. It's going to drop tomorrow on the podcast feed, and it'll be fun. And what's not fun is the Eagles throwing an interception as Jalen Hurts forced one down the field on 3rd down into double coverage, and it was intercepted by the Vikings.
Yeah, so the Vikings are going to take over roughly right around midfield when we come back. A couple of minutes to go in the first quarter there. And Tyler Soto actually posting in our private chat here, our producer tonight, he says he has not seen another back other than DeAndre Swift. DeAndre Swift, 4 carries, 24 yards, averaging 6 yards a carry. And the only guys with targets so far have been the 2 big receivers and Goddard. That's what we're looking at. Jalen Hurts actually had a nice little first quarter going until that interception there. We shall see what happens going forward. And by the way, you can also play BetterCast tonight during the Eagles-Vikings game. You can predict what's going to happen in the game to score points, win prizes. You can chat with the Better Sports Network community in real time. Watch the game, play our free contest, and win prizes. All you have to do is download the free BetterCast app in the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store right now, and you can play BetterCast long after Brian and I sign off tonight, which is about 17 minutes away. Were you surprised, Brian Drake, to see the performance from Jacoby Myers in Week 1, given the presence of Devontae Adams and given the presence of Jimmy Garoppolo as opposed to Derek Carr? I knew he was an aggregator. I knew he was a volume guy. He was a PPR guy in New England. Kind of surprised to see him get off to the start he did in Las Vegas, and now he's in the concussion protocol.
Yeah, it's a shame that he's in the concussion protocol, and he's another guy that's available in way too many leagues. If you're playing, and you listen to this and you're playing a season-long league, maybe on Yahoo or ESPN, guys, get on the horn. What are you doing? I mean, this passing attack has 2 guys. It's Devontae Adams and it's Jacoby Myers. They paid Jacoby Myers pretty good money to come there and be the number 2. 83% of the routes, it probably would have been 100, except for the fact that he got hurt. And you're seeing a guy, he was wide receiver 3 on the week. So, he's seeing the ball a ton. Here's the key stat. I steal this from my good buddy Dwayne McFarland's utilization report at fantasylife.com. I'll give him the plug. He does fantastic work. 57% of the 3rd or 4th down targets that the Raiders had went to Jacoby Myers.
Wow.
That just shows you right there how big of a deal Jacoby Myers is. He's going to see like near double-digit targets every week. I have that roster for the Kings Classic with all those big-time experts. I start Jacoby Myers and I start Zay Flowers in that league. People laugh like, "Oh, your receivers stink." Okay.
Yeah,
we'll see.
Yeah, let them think that.
14-team league with 3 flexes. You got to find somebody.
Now, is there something to be said for Myers gobbling up all that 3rd and 4th down action because Devontae Adams was covered by Patrick Surtain this past week? I don't even know. I haven't looked at that.
Yeah, I mean, Adams' 3rd and 4th down percent, 3rd and 4th down targets are 29%.
Right.
So, I mean, they're still looking at him, but all the elite coverage, the corners are going to go cover Devontae Adams. Jacoby Myers is going to run free in the middle of the field where Darren Waller used to play. He's essentially their new Darren Waller.
Yes.
When you think about it. He's basically their big slot.
With apologies to Michael
that's
Mayer.
what Jacoby Myers is going to do.
That's the frustrating thing. By the way, speaking of frustrating things, it looks like Alexander Mattison has now fumbled. The Eagles have recovered, and the Eagles.
This game's the worst.
The Eagles have the ball. Thursday Night Football, baby. You gotta love it.
I just turned around. I'm like, how the hell did the Eagles get the ball back?
Yeah, it was a good punch out, and it looks like it was Maddox, I think, with tackling Alexander Mattison as Madison was lunging forward for extra yards. Maddox just kind of reached around and punched the ball. He did the Peanut Tillman punch, basically, and got the ball loose. Eagles recovered, and now they have the ball back. They have 11 turnovers in the first quarter over the last 2 seasons. That is the most in the NFL. I don't know if that's like a worthwhile stat at all, but it is a stat. It's a real thing, as is Jacoby Myers. Did we talk enough about I think we talked enough about Kendrick Bourne. I don't want to necessarily hit on the Vikings wide receivers tonight, specifically for start or sit. But your thoughts on like guys like KJ Osborne, Jordan Addison going forward. And I guess let's center this on Jordan Addison, Brian.
Sure.
I got so many questions about start or sit Jordan Addison going forward. I only have a couple of shares on him. I don't know if you targeted him in drafts this year. I didn't, so I only got him on a couple of teams. What are your thoughts on Jordan Addison going forward on this Vikings offense?
It's a really, really small route tree, and the Eagles just missed a field goal. I tweeted this out. Brian Johnson from AC/DC would call plays better than the Brian Johnson the Eagles have. This guy sucks. My God. So, anyways, Jordan Addison. They only throw the ball to a few guys in Minnesota. It's Jefferson, it's Osborne, Addison's going to be in there a little bit, and then obviously the tight end. So, I mean, really, it's Jordan Addison's going to have a role that's going to increase and increase and increase. His target percentage was the same as KJ Osborne last week. He needs to run a few more routes, but I think once he gets his feet under him, he's a better talent than KJ Osborne. He's going to take that role from him. I think he'll become the number 2 on this offense. Do you worry about Addison? Like, I guess if you have Hawkinson, do you worry about Addison eating into your workload? Because Hawkinson was flat out awesome after the Lions shipped him to Minnesota last year. And now you sink this first round draft capital into this rookie receiver. And I think that gave people pause on Hawkinson. We saw at the tail end of the FFPC high stakes drafting season, Brian, Waller was leapfrogging Hawkinson pretty consistently as the third tight end off the board. And I think that part of the reason was Addison. Yeah. And listen, this is a team that's not going to run the football well. We saw it tonight. They tried running the football, and Madison just coughed it up. So what do you think the coaches are going to do? They're going to, all right, Kirk, let's just put it in your hands, and you throw the ball to Jefferson and Osborne and Addison. And he's one of those guys, and I know, FFPC, you've got a lot of deeper benches, and, maybe he's just chilling on your bench right now. He's a second half of the season guy, Jordan Addison. And maybe if you're playing some, not, I don't want to say home leagues, but if you play in a league that's not as high stakes as some of our friends out here like to play in, he's a guy that he might be on a waiver wire right now, and you can just stash him, keep him away for a rainy day, because by the end of the season, it's going to be Jefferson, it's going to be Addison. I think Hawkinson actually becomes the 3 there because Addison's just good. I mean, he's a Blitnikoff winner. He played at Pittsburgh. He was really good there, and then went over to USC and made a name for himself. So I think he's going to move himself up the ranks eventually and blow by KJ. KJ Osborne's just a guy. Yeah, he's just a guy, and like a cuttable guy at this point, right? I mean, geez Louise, he's running 94% of the routes, but is KJ Osborne going to win you a week? That's my point. That when is the proper time to deploy him when you feel good about it? Unless it's like an Addison or Hawkinson injury, or maybe both Addison and Hawkinson injury is what it takes. Like that. You need Jefferson to get hurt. That's the only way you're going to play KJ Osborne is if Jefferson got hurt, and then I'd still think Addison jumps him. Yeah. No, you're probably right. You're probably right on that. Rams wide receivers. Let's talk about them. I want to skip over the Steelers. My God, this game is horrendous, by the way. What happened now? What happened now? Cousins just like tripped over. He was trying to do a handoff, and he tripped over his lineman and fell down, almost fumbled. Like, just call the game now. This is awful. I'm only 2 Miller Lights deep. I'm gonna need a 12-pack to get through this. You gotta up it to bourbon or something at this point. Like there's just beers. I got a wall behind me. If you guys are watching, I see that. What do you got back there? You got some. Yeah, what do I got on the wall? This is tough to see. There's Buffalo Trace. I was gonna say, I thought I saw the Buffalo Trace, the Blantons for sure. You got any Four Roses or Eagle Rare or anything back there? Not up there. There's Blade and Bow. There's a Bottle and Bond from George Dickel, which won. George that won Whiskey of the Year a few years ago. Yep, absolutely. Some Hennessy XO. I was a liquor rep for a long time, and I got all these free bottles. So good for you. Most of those aren't even open. I don't even drink them. Yeah, I have I have a buddy, actually a couple of buddies that work in bars here in Northeast Wisconsin, and every so often they get a great deal on bourbon, and then they'll show me the bottle like, oh, I'm not drinking it. It's just got it. I'm like, dude, just drink it and fill it up with water. Nobody's going to know the difference. Yeah. Until they want to drink it, then they will know the difference. Puka Nacua, we talked about earlier, missed some time
today at practice. Follow the injury report tomorrow. We're not going to have anything new on that. Tutu Atwell obviously had the big game. You're probably trusting Puka Nacua if he's healthy going forward. But what about Tutu Atwell? I mean, I picked him up in a few leagues. Is this guy rosterable? 6 catches, 120 yards. Brian, what do you think about Tutu Atwell going forward?
I mean, I liked Van Jefferson over him, and my cohort at Fantasy Points, Adam Kaplan, who's an NFL insider, used to talk about Van Jefferson, saying he's a guy that they want to get the ball to. Like, he's going to have a breakout season, and then Nacua kind of jumps on the scene after week 1. But none of I keep using that terminology. Does he command the football? And Van Jefferson doesn't. Neither does anybody there who's not Kupp or Nacua now. So. I think if one of those two kind of slight receivers isn't catching the ball, they're going to throw it to Tyler Higbee. So I'm fine with not having either one of them at this point. There's got to be more upside somewhere on your waiver wire than Tutu Atwell or Van Jefferson. There's got to be.
Yeah, there has to be. You would think. JJ Keats, my apologies to you, my good friend, in the YouTube chat right now. Thinking about making a trade. JJ Keats needs a running back here. Thinking about trading Michael Pittman in order to get Isaiah Pacheco on his squad there. And one of the things I always think about when it comes to trading a different position for a different position, what could you get if you just try to manufacture stuff off the waiver wire?
Right.
Pittman slid quite a bit in high stakes drafts in late August and early September, Brian. But the fact that Anthony Richardson showed off as much as he did, the fact that he looked pretty adept throwing the football, the fact that he made Michael Pittman into a really good fantasy receiver week 1, I would have some serious, inhibitions to not trading Pittman for Pacheco right now, or serious inhibitions to doing that, because I feel like you might be giving up the best player in the deal to patch up a hole on your team that you might be able to cover in waivers.
You're 100% right. If you look at Michael Pittman, 8 for 97 and a touchdown, and I'll give Richardson credit. He spread it around a little bit to Granson and Downs, who's it's a sneaky guy. He had 7 targets. Usually quarterbacks like Richardson, who are, not adept passers yet, and they're runners, it's one read, and if it's not there, they're taken off, right? Which I wish we would see more with Jalen Hurts tonight. But if that one read is Michael Pittman and he had 11 targets in week 1, I'm not giving up a guy who had a top 10 finish in PPR to get Isaiah Pacheco. Isaiah Pacheco is a great number 2 running back. If you get him, in the 6th round or wherever, 7th round, dead zone, you picked Isaiah Pacheco.
I would say good. I would say good or solid. I don't know if I'd call him great.
Yeah.
Number 2.
Yeah, he's okay. He's a number 2. That's what he is,
right, Exactly.
But I'd rather have David Montgomery probably than him, but guys like that. But I'm not trading Pittman. I mean, they only have really one target on this team, and it's Pittman. That's who they're going to throw the football to. Pacheco's on this team. They're going to spread it out. Every time they're at the 2-yard line, they run some goofy gimmick shovel pass to a 4th-string tight end. So we're not guaranteed touches there at the goal line. So, no, I'm not trading Pittman for Pacheco. No way. I mean, give me a better running back. Sure, I can get rid of Michael Pittman, but not Pacheco.
To quote Police Chief Grady in Super Troopers, desperation is a stinky cologne. Don't let your league mates
I love that.
Get a waft of this desperation cologne that you're wearing that you need to get a running back. Nobody needs to get a running back. You can find a running back, okay? Don't give up.
Go get Zach Moss. We just talked about him.
Zach Moss would be a perfect idea to get him. And I think the fact that you get to be able to keep Pittman, that's a great idea. Okay, we're running out of time, and I have yet to let you espouse on wide receiver Garrett Wilson. I want you to talk a little bit about with him in redraft as well as dynasty, because I know you're telling everybody to trade him in redraft right now. Is there a dynasty buying opportunity for Garrett Wilson right now? And go.
Absolutely. If you're in a dynasty league and the window is opened for Garrett Wilson, by all means, the Jets are going to do something at quarterback, probably this season. They are in a win now mode. There's no chance they're rolling this whole season with Zach Wilson. I will play quarterback before they let Zach Wilson play, the rest of these games. It's not happening. But season long, for the time being, I am imploring you to try to get out there and sell Garrett Wilson. Why? Because everybody in your league watched that game. That doesn't happen very often. And that's something we don't talk about enough in fantasy. Island games help trades because everybody in your league saw it. Nobody's watching the Tampa Bay game on Red Zone. They don't see all the plays in that. They're not watching Green Bay, Chicago week 1. They're not, right? But they saw what happened with the Giants and Dallas. They saw what happened with Buffalo and the Jets. And they saw Garrett Wilson catch a touchdown pass from Zach Wilson. So then you go to your league mates and go, listen, this guy's quarterback proof. He's catching balls. He's catching touchdowns from Zach Wilson. Why wouldn't you want him? I mean, don't look at last year's stats, because if you did, you'd see that in 9 games with Zach Wilson, Garrett had 34 receptions for 447, 0 touchdowns, and averaged 8.7 fantasy points a game. Zach Wilson can't throw the football. They don't want him to throw the football. So what they're going to do is they're going to take it out of his hands. Once in a while, he'll throw a deep ball, light a candle, say a prayer. Wilson will catch it. But if I can move on from Wilson and get something a little better, I'm absolutely doing it.
I think that's smart. And I think that, the thing is with Wilson, and I think you might have tweeted this out too, after he caught that touchdown on Monday night, a lot of people are like, okay, well, he'll still be relevant. Maybe not so much. And there is still a little buying opportunity here, or selling opportunity here on Garrett Wilson to get maybe 90 cents on the dollar. Maybe 90 cents might be aggressive, but you might be able to get 90 cents on the dollar for Garrett Wilson right now. But if you wait another week, that buying opportunity might be gone, as is right. Our show tonight. And I apologize. I feel like we're just getting started. Brian Drake at Drake Fantasy. Is that the best way to find out all this new stuff that you have coming out?
Yes.
Okay, so just follow you there, right?
Hit me there. Nobody's on Threads. Hit me on X.
Drake Fantasy, Brian Drake, the Fantasy Football Hustle. First, Fighting Chance Fantasy. You can also find him on Sportskeeda, Pro Football, as well as Fantasy Points. Everything he does.
Name every site in America.
And every site in America. Absolutely. He's writing. He's talking. You should be reading. You should be listening. Brian Drake, thank you so much. I'm Eric Balkman from the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, the road of his High Stakes Lowdown on the FFPC. We'll be back at 7/6 Central next week. MyFFPC.com is where to go for the FFPC Weekly Challenge. The best of the Better Sports Network is up next. Thanks so much to Tyler Soto and Brian Drake. We'll be back next week.